Welcome back to Pass the Balance Sheet. Growth is supposed to feel like success. More customers, more revenue, more momentum. But for a lot of business owners, growth is the exact moment things start to feel harder instead of easier. Systems that used to work suddenly don't. Cash feels tighter, not looser. Decisions take longer. Mistakes get more expensive. And it leaves people wondering, why does this feel like it's falling apart when it's actually growing? Today, we're talking about what really happens when growth breaks your systems and why that breakdown isn't failure, but a signal.
And I think this is one of the most confusing seasons for leaders. As business owners and leaders, growth is what we strive for. So when growth creates stress instead of relief, people assume they're doing something wrong. But growth doesn't just expand revenue, it exposes capacity. It puts pressure on systems, communication, and decision making that were never designed to carry this level of demand. And if no one names that part, growth can feel isolating instead of rewarding.
From a financial perspective, growth rarely happens evenly. Revenue increases faster than cash can stabilize. Volume increases faster than systems can keep up. Decisions that used to be simple suddenly require structure. Some common things we see when growth breaks systems. Books that were good enough become unreliable. Cash flow tightening despite higher sales. Processes living in people's heads instead of systems. Owners still making every decision long after the business outgrows that model. On paper, the business looks healthier. In real life, everything feels stretched. That's because growth doesn't just magnify what's working, it magnifies what's fragile.
What's happening emotionally during this phase is important to talk about. Growth often comes with loss, even when it's positive. Loss of control, loss of simplicity, loss of the version of the business that felt manageable. People don't always acknowledge that grief. They just push harder, assuming discomfort means they need to hustle more. But what the business is usually asking for isn't more effort, it's evolution. And without that space to acknowledge that shift, leaders burn out trying to operate a business that has already outgrown them. So let's dig into the meat of this. Let's first talk about why growth exposes leadership gaps and not incompetence. First, as revenue grows, three things grow faster than revenue: operational complexity, as you mentioned, Cash, decision making, and risk exposure. Leadership capacity must scale with all three, and if it doesn't, gaps appear, but not because somebody's worse at their job, it's because the environment has changed. Um, so let's put this into an example. Let's say, let's go back to the humble beginnings. I started a business today. I know and manage every aspect to the job. I'm the sales. I'm the face of the product of my service. I have the direct customer relationship. I invoice the customer. I produce something for them, and I oversee the receipts coming in. So pretty manageable. It's a one-man shop, but it works as I'm growing. But when I am thinking of scaling, I see demand is high. So, okay, now I hired a team to scale the volume of work that I used to do alone. So what exactly has changed? It's not just the volume. It's, you're increasing, yes, you're increasing the projects that you're managing and the services that you're offering. But with that, there's increased cash movement, vendor exposure. You're working with now more vendors. You are working with more clients. The invoicing part, the customer relationship part, that all takes time. Overlapping timelines. I might be working on my project that might be a 5-week project, and the revenue will be received after 5 weeks or something like that. Another project manager is working on something else. Those revenues are trickling in at a different schedule. So there's more complexity being layered on. With more people, more HR complexity. You're now, it's not just a one man shop. You are now dealing with different personalities, different dynamics between departments, and obviously more capital risk. And we'll get into that detail a little bit in a little bit. And lastly, the operational visibility becomes a little bit more complex. It's not straightforward anymore. It's not just, revenues in, cash out. No, there are all of these layers with multiple projects and multiple vendors and employees and all of those components. So the same applies to mid-sized businesses expanding. Whether I'm a construction business doubling from 2 project managers to 5 project managers, or I'm an asset manager whose portfolio is growing from 1 mil to 1 bill, or 1 bill to 10 bill. The scenario might be different, but the concept remains. Kash, can you talk about why the "we'll fix it later" mentality stops working during growth?
This is one of my favorite topics. I think I say this every single podcast, but this one particularly is one of my favorites to talk about right now because it's so prevalent in every business because every business is growing in one way or another. And it's so prevalent to my life right now, and my business right now. So the "we'll fix it later," I think, is a really passive way for a leader to not address the problem. It kind of brings up this, like, it's not important, right? Like, we'll deal with it later. It comes from this idea of and I had a leader in a business say this to me. When things settle down, we'll address the issue. We know what the issue is, but we'll address it. The problem with that mindset is that most of those business owners aren't in the weeds of things, right? Everything is coming up to them. They're usually at the 40,000 foot level. Maybe if they're really in it, they're at the 20,000 foot level, but doing all of the things. The problem is they don't understand the weight that their team is carrying. And then you start to get this resentment of, they don't care about me. They don't care about the struggles we're going through. Do they not see how this is not working? We don't have enough resources. And so our greatest assets in our businesses become our greatest liabilities. And so for me, growth is so important, right? You mentioned this in the beginning. We all strive for growth. We all want more, and more and growth is such an ambiguous term. It can be more revenue. It could be more profit. It could be more clients. It could look different to everyone, more EBITDA. But what happens is when, like you said, when you grow, the relevant topic to me is when I started the firm, it was just me. It was me saying, I'm going to take on X amount of clients. And I had a 3, 6, 9, 12, 18-month plan, as you can imagine. Because that's just me.
Yep.
But I had this plan of, this is what ideal growth looks like. At the 3-month mark, I need to be making this much revenue and then working that backwards. In order to make this much revenue, I need this many clients doing this. And in order to hold this many clients, I need this much time in my schedule to work on their books. And then I knew at what point I needed to bring on another employee, and when I needed to bring on the second employee, when I was going to need an executive assistant. So this is all great on paper, but what happens is not what I built, right? My 9-month plan happened in 4 months. And so now not only am I onboarding employees, but I'm having to build systems and not look like I don't have my shit together as I'm onboarding them. And so what happens in this is we say, oh, we'll just kick the can down the road and when we have time. The problem is you don't ever have time. There's never any time. And so going back to my business, this week alone, we onboarded 2 people. I onboarded an executive assistant and I onboarded a second bookkeeper. So now this firm that was only supposed to be me at this juncture in time is now me and 3 employees. And they're very much more organized than I am. And so they're asking me questions on like, okay, Cash, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? And if I kick it down the road, there's no organization within the business. They have the grace with me in, she's a new business owner. She's a seasoned leader, but new business owner. Um, she's done it all herself. She's built the relationship. She's built the rapport with the clients and now passing it on. So long story to say, kicking it down the kicking the can down the road, you just keep kicking it. So you have to address these problems when they arise. And as business leaders, we keep using that excuse of time. And I think a lot of us, my husband and I were laughing this week that a lot of us as business owners, we go into our own business so that we have freedom, so we have more time, so we have XYZ. I have never had less time in my entire life than right now, in my business. I've never worked more hours in my life than I have in the last couple of weeks owning my own business. But as I'm putting in the time, I'm seeing the cracks be sealed and I'm seeing some of the weight lifted up because when I'm creating this structure for my employees to say, this is how we're going to track time and giving them the why behind it. We're tracking time on this spreadsheet. It seems so simple to you, but what happens is it flows into this master spreadsheet for me that has pivot tables that we can now look at margin by client. We can look at client acquisition. We can look at labor rates. We can look at all of these things. And so when you bring them along into the process, you get the buy-in, but then you also give them, at least I do, give them the autonomy to say, if this isn't working, let's have a conversation, right? You bring them into it and they have buy-in and they feel like they have the trust and rapport to come to you when things aren't working. Will you always be able to change it as a business owner? No. But um, if you kick the can down the road, more stuff surfaces because if one thing is not working and you don't address it, what I have found is it's not because it's that one thing that's not working, it's something that's three levels below it that's not working. And that just continues to get exacerbated. And so I hope that answers your question and like why we can't kick it down the
Absolutely.
road. Um, but I think it also leads into kind of as you grow complexities, right? When I was a one-man show, things were so simple. Like I had the control to say, this is how we're going to onboard. This is how I'm going to invoice. I'm going to invoice on this day every week. But as you grow, those complexities get bigger. And so I would love for you to kind of touch on this, like as complexities grow in business, more decisions come into play. And so can you speak to decision fatigue increasing in these complexities and how maybe you have managed it as complexities grow?
Absolutely. First, I just want to touch on a couple of items, a couple of gems that you brought up in your piece as I answer my question. So you touched, really heavily on kind of the importance of SOPs without really saying the words. And you touched earlier on, the fact that a lot of founders, in the beginning, we're kind of keeping the processes in our head. We know what all the workflows are, what the next steps are, and so we can reproduce, kick out more volume. But when we have to then represent to somebody else, this is how we scale up, then we can't rely anymore on having those processes in our heads. We now need to convey to them what is going to be the most efficient way that we're going to, kick out payables or receivables, whatever their duties are. You now need to give them a blueprint of this is, I'm going to give you a large volume. This is how you this is how you make it work with an increasing amount of clients. So with that, essentially, you need to kind of build, I call it a recipe, because it's something that, you kind of repeat every time, but whatever you call it, SOP, recipe, it's meant to essentially be repeated. You've already tested the most efficient ways to do this workflow. So now you just have to repeat it to scale. However, when whether it's something broken in an existing process or a process doesn't exist, in a business, the most realistic way that these things come to head and people find out about them are when somebody fucks up, something breaks in the process. And so, it may look in different ways. Either we lost cash here, this wasn't as profitable as we initially thought it was going to be, or it doesn't have to be even related to cash. It could be we're talking to an investor and we gave them wrong information or something like that. Like if something breaks in the process, like some sort of like fire happens that we put out, this is typically the way that we learned about a broken process. Because to your point, Cash, nobody has the luxury of, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to plan well in advance all of these different scenarios that will come up and have this little handy book to come to. You're kind of building it as you go. So I learned to embrace the mess ups and really take them as learning opportunities. So what did we uncover is what's broken in our process, or maybe a process doesn't exist. However, this is it's very easily kind of set on paper, but in reality it shows up in very kind of sensitive, I guess maybe sensitive is not the right word, but there are people involved, there are emotions involved, because as I mentioned, in somebody's lap the process broke. And so if it broke in finance, something happened with let's say I sent a wire to an incorrect party, and I say this because this has happened. This has happened before, and luckily it was reversible. It was an in-house vendor, but it could have not been reversible. So, but essentially, I'm taking the responsibility. Okay, this happened in my department, and so my approach is not pointing a finger. Okay, who effed up? Like, who sent this? Why did you do this? And never do this again. Like, these are not productive ways of, of bringing up the situation. But my approach is always a problem-solving approach. But there is always discomfort in bringing this up. So essentially, you want to frame the outlook to essentially the outlook being something is broken in our process, not a specific person or team is to blame. And so as leaders, I definitely want to dedicate a whole episode to leadership and non-blame environment and, kind of good ways to lead a company. But I'll mention it very high level in today's episode. I live by the no blame rule. This is something that Etsy came up with, and definitely want to dedicate a whole episode to it. But in short, it's essentially it's meant to, it doesn't mean that like you can make mistakes and there's no accountability. It's meant to bring accountability, but in a problem solving manner. So if like if I effed up and I know that I am not going to get yelled at, then I am going to be the first one to say, this fell through the cracks in my lap. This is, in this part of the process, we didn't think through this type of situation. And so this is why it led, to me making this decision or whatever. And now it becomes a problem solving conversation, and not a, well, this is you, this is you. So, but unfortunately, this is something that's very hard for a lot of leaders, or leaders don't quite get the approach is is not, we're not in a problem solving approach, we're in a blaming approach of like, okay, are you fit for the job, and versus like, is our process broken?
I want to jump in because I think like the overarching kind of idea that you're getting at here is that when complexities grow, decisions become more, you have teams and what have you, and so you leaders generally they look at the people are broken, right? The people are incompetent, not is the process broken. They never want to look at it. And as a business owner myself, I think it's because it's so emotional, right? Like the business has become my baby. I've put my blood, sweat, tears, resources, financials into this, right? It's become like a child to me. And so I look at it as a mom, like the business can't be broken, the processes can't be broken, but they very much can be. And so I'm so glad that you touched on that because you do have to come in as an unbiased party and look at the processes. And I have a perfect example of like this was early again, like early my humble beginnings. I was sitting as a controller in a company and newer to that role, I had been asked to do a few things that maybe a typical controller wouldn't have been asked to do, or there would have been some sort of oversight before it went to where it was. But essentially, the company was going to an M&A conversation, and we were starting the process of due diligence. And most of these conversations start with uh, turning over financials. You may like redact some information, but what they're really drilling into is EBITDA. Is the business profitable, or can I make it profitable with whatever my circumstances are? And so in our situation, we were looking at being acquired by another company. And so they asked for EBITDA, and very new to the position, new to the company, new to everything. There was not really a CFO above me. It was the controller that was the highest level in this department at the time. And so I was reporting then to the CEO. And he came to me and said, we really need EBITDA. Didn't really give me the whole picture of what was entailed, right?
Mhm.
I don't know that it would matter, um, because again, I was humble beginnings. But he said I need EBITDA. And so, I did the best I could. I put EBITDA together from the information that I had, and there was no check and balance. I sent it to him, and he then immediately forwarded it off to the potential suitors. And come to find out, when we sent the balance sheet and the profit and loss, the EBITDA was wrong. Like
Mhm.
materially wrong, not
Mhm.
just like a couple cents wrong. Like it changed the landscape of we're a profitable, uh, really desired company to there's no way we can even put anything together here.
Mhm.
And so um, there was quite a bit of resentment from the superior to me as well. It's expected, right? When we make mistakes in finances, it's not like we didn't acquire a customer, or we spilt some material on the ground. It has major consequences in some situations. And so there was definitely some resentment that was going on in the situation. But in that, what I remember is the failure, right? When I look back at my career and I look at my successes, moving from controller to CFO, or gaining certain accolades or certificates or awards, moving from CFO to CEO, it was this grand evening, right? We popped some champagne. We had a great dinner, toast, etc. And the next day, life went back to normal. But when I made mistakes, such as messing up EBITDA, if we go back to the shit sandwich conversation, like that was one of my very first major shit sandwiches that I
Mhm.
had to eat at my own picnic table because no one else wanted to sit at it. But I had to sit in that and I had to really go to the drawing board and figure out what did I do wrong? Why didn't this work? And really learn. And so I say all this because I want people to know that you and I are, humans in our own nature, and we're trying to pass along some of the lessons that we learned so that you don't have to learn our same lessons. You can learn your own. But essentially what I'm saying is that there is so much growth and learning in the failures. I didn't learn anything in my successes. I learned how to open a bottle of champagne. I really learned something about myself, about the business, about the department when I was in those failures. And so if you are a leader or you're an owner experiencing your own set of failures, I would tell you, advise you to be humble and look at, what's going wrong and why is it going wrong. And if you have employees, I would, to Sassy's point, take the blame game out of it, sit with them. What went wrong? How can they learn from this? How can the business learn from this? What systems need to change in order for the business to then propel forward? Because if you can be a leader that can come sit alongside people that you are responsible for stewarding and leading, you will gain so much trust and rapport that they will grow leaps and bounds, and those failures will be different as they grow, but they are more willing to come to you and say, I messed up, or can you help me with this, versus hiding it like a toddler and sweeping it under the rug. And so um, I so appreciate the fact that you brought up the people versus processes, because I would say in my experience, over 90% of the time, yes, people mess up, but the breakdowns are really in the processes. And you also talked about those SOPs and documentation, and it comes back to if you as the business leader or the business owner were struck by a bus this afternoon, how long could your business run without you? Or if you were to go on vacation tomorrow, could you really go on vacation? Could you really check out? And if the answer is no, or you have to think about it, you need to document your processes or your recipes or whatever you want to call them. And you should not be holding on to tribal knowledge. So I
You
hope
nailed
that
it.
is helpful. And sorry for the tangent from you, but I'm
No,
so
you.
passionate about people being able to feel comfortable and making mistakes.
Mhm.
Don't make the same mistakes over and over again, but it's okay to make mistakes. If people are making mistakes in your business, it means they're growing.
Absolutely. And once those mistakes are made and you realize that there was something missing or broken in the process, absolutely update that SOP so that you can avoid that mistake in the future. And that's key here because we'll keep continuing making the same mistakes if we are not utilizing that recipe, where we've already thought through.
I agree with you in the fact that it's a living, breathing document and it should be documented, right? Like, so once you write the SOP,
It
that's
doesn't
not
end there.
written in stone, right?
Right.
It changes. And another great example of this is you probably see this too, Sassy, within your business and in your history is, when I was coming up through the company that I spent most of my time at, there weren't a lot of processes and procedures documented. And so I was able to kind of be free in building those myself, building what worked for me. What's efficient to me may not be efficient to you, but then I had someone else come along behind me and I gave her what I had, but I also gave her the autonomy to say, this doesn't have to be done my way, right? It
Mhm.
has to be
Mhm.
done.
Mhm.
We have to close the books by the 10th every month, but you don't have to do it in my way. These are the things that have to be done. But if you find a more efficient way, please, please
Yes.
do.
Yes, actually, that's an excellent point because when we're talking about SOPs, you're right. The way you can do a task probably several ways and it'll still, the end result will be the same. So you definitely want to give options and autonomy for that. But the things that you absolutely must include that are not negotiable are the things in the process that relate to, approvals. Like, for example, nothing can leave like a quote to a client or for a big project or a model of, we're going to acquire this property, here's what we think we're going to earn, these are the returns for it. Like we have our draft ready of, what we think the project will look like. Nothing can leave the door without, the CFO signing off on something. Like, so there are different steps, to different processes. And so you want to make sure that you solidify all the things that are not negotiable. And those typically pertain to like final approvals, like before a client sees something, this needs to be verified. Before the president reviews this, several people need to verify the math. Did the builder of the model, maybe they, were so in the weeds with building this that, minor things are not, minor errors are no longer standing out to them. So you need a second pair of eyes that looks at it and says, yep, I've done this math, I've followed this process, I agree that you even built this model correctly. So those are the things that you don't want to skip out on. But the methodologies of performing certain tasks, I absolutely agree about
I
flexibility there.
agree with that too. And I would say when you're looking at, because while I hope business owners and leaders are listening to this, I also hope people that are in their humble beginnings are listening to this and learning something from us and our mistakes that we've made. But we call those, or I call them in the finance world, we call them dual controls, right? Nothing leaves. It's protection for the employee, the employer, the company, in having multiple eyes on it. And as someone coming up in their career, there's a little bit of ego that you have as you're coming up, right? You want all of the access to, like, well, I just want to be the final approver. I don't need someone. I want to show that I can do this. You have to take ownership of that, right? Like, so it is protection for you, it's protection for CFO, for it to go through the proper channels. But on the flip side, to the leaders, you really have to take the time to look through these, right? Like, it's easy for me to trust, like build trust and rapport with my employees. And I had a controller that I fully trusted. And I really didn't need to look through her work, but if my name was going to be signed on something, the ownership and responsibility was then transferred to me, right? And so I can't have her do the work, then me sign off on it, be accurate, go to a board table, due diligence conversation, acquisition table, and say, oh yeah, my controller messed that up because my signature's on the bottom, right? So there's so many reasons why those non-negotiables are in place, and and I agree with you, and having those proper channels, proper chain of commands, it has nothing to do with ego. It has nothing to do with taking ownership away from someone or limiting their ability to grow. It has everything to do with protection in that. But also, as you grow in that totem, you have to then take those responsibilities. You don't get to sit in the CFO seat and then blame the people below you. You with that title comes responsibility, and the responsibility means that if your department fails, that's on you. It's not on the three people that sit below you. That is on you. That's why you get paid the big bucks to sit in the big seat.
That's right. You touched on dual control, which I want to expand on as it ties back to our original topic here, about kind of scaling and growth and the differences between, your humble beginnings and you stepping into a growing business. So, when you start out, typically it's a one-man shop or two-man shop, and so you aren't thinking about controls. You're doing everything, right? And
Mhm.
so those things are the things that will no longer work when applied to a larger model. So in accounting, for example, in the accounting department, we have dual controls for to really prevent fraud, right? Like when you're a one-man shop, you know you're not going to screw yourself, but when you're adding different elements to it, you need to make sure that you're preventing fraud. And so that means layering
Mhm.
different duties. If you're paying bills, you can't also be reconciling the bank statements, because you're then the only pair of eyes who sees what really went out the door. And the same can be applied for other positions and other we have to kind of wear different hats in a smaller role. And so even when it's not just the one-man shop, it might expand to a 5-person team, but still it's a small team. And so this might mean that the finance person, or let's think about another example. Let's say like the salesperson, they might be in charge of obtaining the sale, but they might also have some post-sale workflows that you work in this environment because there's no other people. The other staffers are maybe marketing or somebody else, somebody who like really does not have context here. However, applying this to you're growing now, there's a big problem conceptually with the salesperson also overseeing for example, from this project, the distributions or profitability or
Mhm.
dividends or something that come out from this specific project. Like they can't be involved in calculating
Mhm.
that because they're biased. They want
Mhm.
to either get the commissions or whatever kickbacks, or they want to have their project be running at a certain uh, in a certain position. And so now they are influenced, they have incentive to finagle this workflow that's in their lap. So we have to remove that the
Mhm.
incentive to do the wrong thing, essentially. So you want to separate those workflows and make sure that the person calculating profitability off of this project is not the person who brought in the sale.
Oh, I 100% agree. And I would go even a step further to say the person, we saw this in the manufacturing world because we were a very small team and so we saw this a lot in especially production where, our goal was always production efficiency, right? Get as much through production in the least amount of cost possible. The problem with that is there was not a lot of oversight because we were a small team. And so we knew what our record throughput was. But now you have the production manager that is driving this goal, right? And so they have the ability to book the labor in a certain way where they normally would do two people or three people on a line. They're now going to try it with two people, which is not
Mm-hmm.
safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's
Mm-hmm.
no one above him necessarily to say nope, we're not doing that. Or um or we can look at just straight throughput, like for us, we did everything in kilograms. Like maybe our throughput on a record day was 600 units and we're trying to get to 601. And they throw four people on the line to get to 601, but then they're not looking at it from like the labor standpoint. And so dual controls, yes, it comes predominantly from the finance world, really to prevent fraud, like you said. But dual controls it's really implementing policies and procedures to eliminate biases,
Mm-hmm.
meaning we want to propel the business forward. We want to have measurable KPIs. We want to grow in a meaningful way. But how do we do that in an unbiased way? Like you said, it means that the person reconciling the account is not the person writing the checks. Because if you're writing a check to yourself and then reconciling it, who's going to catch that? If you're calculating commission, but you're also selling the deals, who's the check and balance there? So yes, I'm
Exactly.
fully in alignment with you on this.
Yeah, thank you for touching on those examples from your world. Those are very relevant to kind of understand the situation. So, Cash, last topic I kind of want to delve into is, can you tell me what have you seen in terms of resistance from leaders when it comes to implementing formal systems?
Yeah, like I said, I'm kind of going through this right now. And having spent so much time in the corporate world, I am a big advocate for documenting. But again, going back to the beginning of this, when you're growing, when you're scaling and it's happening quick, time is of the essence, and we tend to kick things down the road. And so I would say the big resistance is in order um, to move formal systems forward, they have to be documented. They're not formal if they're in your head. They're not formal if they're verbalized. They are formal when they are on pen, when they are on paper. And getting a owner, founder, typically to sit down and formalize something or put them in front of a computer, it can be a daunting task. So I would say that's the first piece of resistance that I see. And I'd also say, again, kind of going back to the business kind of becoming their baby, there's ego attached. And I'm
Yes.
no exception, right? The accounting firm that I'm building, it's my fourth child. It's something that's so meaningful to me because if it's not successful, I have everything to lose. My family has everything to lose. So I've put truly blood, sweat, tears, time, um, money into this business, and if it doesn't succeed, I lose it all. And so there's this ego attached of no one can do it as good as me, or no one's going to care as much as I care. And you have to check that. And I'm constantly having to tell myself, like, check this. You've hired this person to do this. They're competent. You wouldn't have hired them if they couldn't. You have to trust the process. They might break some things. That's okay. Are they going to break the business? Probably not. Um, but I would say that ego in the founder or the owner is another huge thing where you get this resistance, which kind of leads into this, it's how we've always done it. That I would say I'm a little bit better at because I really come from a mindset of if you can do this in 20 minutes and it used to take me an hour and you're getting all of the non-negotiables done, by all means, it costs me less. So let's do it that way. So there's less attached in that. But I see a lot of founders and owners with this mindset of we've always done it this way, so we need to do it this way. They're not open to creating efficiencies. So,
Mhm.
um, first, I would say getting things documented is the biggest piece of resistance because it's time. Second is ego attached to it being your baby and feeling like no one's going to do it as good as you do it or you care about it. And third is not being open to there's other ways to do it and possibly they be more efficient.
Mhm. Yeah, you hit on several heads with that nail. But I specifically want to extrapolate the ego comment because, first of all, the
Shred me
comment.
apart here because as a business owner, my ego's attached. So
um, I think you mentioned something that really resonated with me because it's some quality that I possess and have a hard time delegating things because I know that I can do it the best way, and so in in many instances in the past, and I think to a degree I still do it. Um, Sometimes I don't push out enough work, delegate enough work because I'm like,
mhm,
"Ugh, they won't understand it to this capacity. They won't do it as good, and I just don't even give them a chance to prove me wrong, to succeed. I just kind of hog that, and it's the
mhm,
absolute worst thing for a an executive leader or a founder to do everything, so they can't really see ahead of them. They're stuck in that daily operational stuff. You can't do that. That's why, if you're scaling, that's why you have a trusted team, right? If you don't trust them, you probably shouldn't. You should be a one-man shop, so definitely ego in that. In that perspective, where not enough leaders delegate because of that fear, or not even giving a chance to see how somebody else would do it. But then the second way that the ego comes out, and you touched this in an earlier conversation, but I don't think this pertains to you, because I know that you, definitely not in your business, but I actually have a past. One of my previous lives, when I worked for a boss, essentially, like, the ego was represented in, he wanted to be the cool guy, getting along with all of the workers, and not really being an enforcer of standards, right? And this is something that a lot of business owners, who really don't know how to, like, wear both hats, and get the same respect or result from their employees. Some lean towards the, hey, I'm going to be your buddy, like, you have other managers, that kind of make sure that you're in line, but I'm going to be your buddy. And so, with that, this could be absolutely catastrophic if you can absolutely be a buddy to your employees, but you have to support your managers and the standards that they're trying to implement, and you have to support accountability for people. So you can absolutely still be friendly, but know that this person needs to improve on something, and you're still fine being friendly with them because you have processes where somebody is working on that with them. I This was earlier in my career, where I essentially, my boss really just wanted to be a friend to others. He didn't know how to have those hard conversations, but he saw that this is where I had a forte. And so I remember us having a conversation and him actually, like, blatantly asking or saying, like, I need you to be the bitch. I need you to tell people, hold them accountable. These are the standards. And I'm like, absolutely, that's no problem. I didn't come here to make friends. Like, we all have a job to do, doesn't mean I'm going to be, it's not going to be, it doesn't mean I'm going to be a monster and attacking people, but somebody has to hold people accountable. And where my experience was absolute hell was he did not support me publicly. So, like, as executives, and even if you don't like somebody on your team as an executive, you have to kind of, like, show face, right, for your kids or your employees. I say kids as if though, we're the parents and they're our kids, but it's kind of a similar situation. You have to be singing the same tune in front of your staff, because if they're seeing disarray with management not trusting each other, then they're not going to follow any of the standards. And so this is where it absolutely broke for me, is he didn't announce to anybody else, like, hey, Sassy is please listen to her direction here. It was behind the scenes. So I was doing the act, and they're like, okay, Sassy, why the hell are you telling us what to do? Don't tell me what to do, And so they're going to him, and, like, Sassy is, like, why is she telling us what to do? And it's now becomes more of a combative thing of, and not because I don't have any support from leadership of, like, no, she's been put into this position to make sure that these standards are upheld. And so with that, I'll just kind of conclude with that ego. Yes, you can still be a friend, you can still be the cool, boss owner guy, but when it comes to, hey, you're here to make me money and to have this be a
Mhm.
profitable business. Don't shy away from like that. Those are your standards. So absolutely, you have to support all the efforts for accountability and following standards.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I remember as I was kind of nearing the end of my corporate career, something that we really touched on is we're not always going to agree at the table, right? When I had my weekly leadership meetings with my leaders, we went in for we ran on EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System, and so we had level tens every week, and it's high level, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of mitigates meetings. Like, can you wait till the level 10 to address this? And so it was an hour and a half long meeting, but we didn't always agree on everything in that meeting. But I will tell you, if we didn't agree, we walked out united, meaning I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go out and berate people that didn't agree with me or didn't, vote the way I wanted to vote or do the things that I wanted to do, and vice versa, right? We were a united team. And so we called that team A, right? You're on team A. That's your first priority. You can be buddies with the team that you lead or the
Mm-hmm.
teams below that, but team A always has to come first. And the other thing that I want to touch on is you mentioned a little bit delegation, which is another very hard thing for me. I think in finance,
Mm-hmm.
we're very protective because so much can go wrong. But a tool that helped me so much is called a Johari window.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do is you, on a piece of paper, you draw four squares, kind of like a four-paned window. And in the top left-hand corner, I'm not very good at my left and my right, but the top left-hand corner, you write all of the things that you love to do and you're really good at. So you take a day, a week, a month, or whatever, all the tasks that you need to do or complete. The top is everything you love to do and you're good at. Right next to that are the things that you love to do, but you may not be very good at. And then that bottom left hand is things that you don't love to do, but you are good at. And then that corner is things that you don't like to do and you're not good at. And you start to delegate. You look at that bottom right hand first, things that I'm not good at and I don't love to do. Why are you spending time doing those? Get those off of your plate immediately. And then you work your way over the things you don't like to do, but you're maybe good at. Can you teach someone else to be good at them? And maybe they actually do love to do it and kind of work your way. And so the idea of this is that you're still going to have to do things you don't like, you're not good at, things that you like and you are good at, blah, 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 blah. But you should be spending 80+% of your time in that top left hand corner of what you're good at and what you love to do. And so if you are a business owner or a leader and you are not sure what needs to be delegating or you feel that pressure of holding on to too much, I would challenge you to do something very similar to that and start moving things off of your plate that are not serving you, the department, or the business well. But with that said, should we land the plane?
We should absolutely land it, but I have learned something new. I have not heard of this concept before, and I think that's absolutely brilliant in even something I can apply to when I'm questioning, should I delegate this or not? I will absolutely use that. Thank you for that.
Good. So here's the reframe that changes how growth feels. When growth breaks your systems, it's not because you failed to plan perfectly. It's because systems are built for where you were, not where you're going. Growth is feedback. It tells you things like what needs structure, what needs clarity, what can no longer live on instinct alone. The mistake isn't that things broke, it's ignoring what the breakage is asking you to rebuild.
From the human side, this is where compassion matters. You're not supposed to have systems for a version of the business you haven't lived yet. You build them by being in it. Feeling overwhelmed during growth doesn't mean you're unqualified. It means you've outgrown something. The goal isn't to get back to what worked before, but it's to build what can actually support what you've created.
So if growth feels heavier than you expected, here's what we want you to hear. Growth doesn't break businesses. Unexamined growth does. When systems fail, they're not accusing you, they're informing you. Going past the balance sheet means recognizing when growth is asking for structure, not speed.
And it means giving yourself permission to slow down long enough to listen. You don't have to abandon momentum to build stability. You don't have to prove your worth by pushing through chaos. Growth is meant to stretch you, not consume you. So notice what's breaking, not with judgment, but with curiosity. And when you're ready, come back and keep going with us past the balance sheet. If you found value in today's episode, we'd love your support. Follow or subscribe to Past the Balance Sheet wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss what's next. If you've resonated, take a moment to leave a review. It helps more business owners to find honest conversations about money, leadership, and what really happens behind the scenes.
See you next episode.